Putin wins, it will be seen as a victory of Putin, a victory of all those who are against the so-called West, including the United States.
Right now, of course, there's much action this weekend trying to see if it's possible to reach some kind of settlement or ceasefire, at least in Ukraine. More talks between US envoys, European leaders and President Zelensky are planned, with the coalition of the willing meeting in Germany next week. But Russian airstrikes are continuing to rain down on Ukrainian targets. Let's get the thoughts now of José Manuel Barroso, former President of the European Commission and Prime Minister of Portugal. Hello to you.
Hello, Adam. How are you?
I'm fine. It's nice to hear from you. Now, do you think really that the coalition of the willing, or the European voice as represented principally by Germany, France and the UK at the moment, is it just paying lip service, and will it have any influence, do you think, on what the Americans seek to impose?
I think there is real influence. Of course, it's true that the Americans appear to be leading this effort because they can put a lot of pressure in Ukraine. In fact, that's basically, it's not a true mediation in the sense of being an honest broker between two parties. It's putting all the pressure that the United States can put in this kind in the weakest side, the side that has been suffering an aggression by Russia. But at the end of the day, this is in Europe. I'm sure that the position of Europe counts a lot. For instance, part of this proposed deal is about accession of Ukraine to the European Union, which is quite interesting. Because, in fact, since NATO doors are closed to Ukraine, the only way now to have Ukraine in this side of the world, let's put it like that, and what we're using to call the West, is, of course, through the European Union. And, of course, Ukraine cannot be a member of the European Union without the European Union accepting it. So it's a substantial, existential part of the deal, the European position. And I also think that Europeans have been, by persuasion, by different tactics, trying to soften some of the, in my opinion, unacceptable proposals made by some of the American negotiators that were, in fact, equivalent to surrender. It could be humiliation not only of Ukraine, but also of Europe. And to some extent also from the United States, to be honest, because the world is looking at this as how can the so-called West resist to Russia. And so although today the current administration appears very often closer to Russia than to Europe, that is some very important development, to be frank. The reality is that that's not the way the world sees it. The world, what we usually call now the global South, is looking at this matter. And in fact, if Putin wins, it will be seen as a victory of Putin, a victory of all those who are against the so-called West, including the United States. So I believe it's a very difficult situation. But to be very concrete to responding your question, yes, the Europeans are playing a role. By the way, UK is playing a very important role, and I really welcome that. I may be biased because I'm a pro-British European, but I always say that when it comes to matters of war and peace, the British are almost always right. Almost always right, differently from others that have many hesitations. And now, when we see that the Americans apparently are hesitating a lot, apparently they don't know who is their friends, who is their enemies. Britain has no doubts. That's great. And I think Europeans as a whole also are on the right side. So together with the UK, the European Union, and of course others, Norway is a good example, are very clear about what they should be doing.
And yet, yes. For example, the European Union has still not reached agreement on using the Russian assets held in the EU to give financial support to Ukraine.
No, in fact, in that matter, there was remarkable progress. As you know,
the assets are frozen, but they haven't been handed over, have they?
Yes, but let's just explain probably for our listeners what's happening, because now there is a regulation, there is legislation approved on the 12th of December, so just now, Commission proposal that, well, it's a regulation, so it's European law now, that all the assets of Russia in Europe, namely in terms of the central bank and Central Bank of Russia and sovereign wealth funds, 210 billion euros are frozen and will be frozen unless the aggression stops and unless Russia agrees to reparations to Ukraine and cooperates with Ukraine. So this is, and that cannot be changed unless there is another vote by qualified majority. And by the way, that vote, it's important to note, only 2 countries voted against it. So this is a major development. Having said that, as you said, Adam, and you are right, this is not sufficient. We should now have the possibility to use this 210 billion for a loan to Ukraine to support their effort. And I believe that's critical. I think if you ask me what is the most important point now, it's not negotiations going on, that of course they are important, between those American negotiators, is Europeans supporting this effort of war. So only in that case, Ukraine has the leverage to get some kind of agreement. So let's see if the Europeans can reach it. There are some objections that are in some ways understandable, namely from Belgium. If I were the Prime Minister of Belgium, and I was Prime Minister of Portugal, I understand very well this position. I also would not accept without having solid guarantees that in case there is retaliation, I'm not going to be isolated, and Belgium should not be isolated. So it's completely fair what the Belgians are saying. So I hope that Europeans either find a solution that protects Belgium, or they will find another way of supporting Ukraine. Because for now, the important thing is to reinforce the position of Ukraine in any possible agreement for a ceasefire that I believe it's possible, but frankly, it is not going to mean peace. And that's an important point I want to underline. I don't believe there will be peace in the foreseeable future, true peace in terms of reconciliation, stable peace arrangements, security arrangements between Russia and us, because it's not just about Ukraine, it's about all of us in Europe.
You made a commitment to the Europeans back in July, if I remember right, to participate in some kind of a peacekeeping force should there be a peace agreement. You mentioned, I think, air support, intelligence, and so forth. Does that commitment still stand? Is the U.S. ready to go contribute to
It's
this?
called the security agreement,
Yeah.
basically, that they
Yeah.
call it, the
Which
security
sounds like
agreement.
one
Yeah,
of
we
the
would
four.
help. We would help with security because it's, I think, a necessary factor in getting it done. I thought that we were very close with Russia to having a deal. I thought we were very close with Ukraine to having a deal. In fact, other than President Zelensky, his people loved the concept of the deal. You know, we threw something out.
This is the 4-part deal.
Well, there's 4 or 5 different parts. It's, you know, a little bit complicated because you're cutting up land in a certain way. It's not the easiest thing. It's sort of like a complex real estate deal times 1,000, right? But it's a deal that would have stopped the killing of thousands of lives every month. Thousands and thousands of lives, mostly soldiers, but as you know there's some bombs being dropped.
Sort of a career-link ceasefire that we don't resolve?
Well, there's a meeting on Saturday. We'll see whether or not we attend the meeting. We said we'll attend the meeting if you think there's a good chance of they want me to attend. They want us to attend. And we'll be attending the meeting on Saturday in Europe if we think there's a good chance. And we don't want to waste a lot of time. We think it's negative. We want it to get settled. We want to save a lot of lives. As you know, in the past we spent could be $350 billion giving it to Ukraine. You know, we got nothing in return, but we gave it to Ukraine. I ended up getting rare earth in return, even though I didn't spend money. And we are now selling weapons to NATO. We're not selling it to Ukraine. We're selling weapons at full price to NATO, as you know. They distribute those weapons probably to Ukraine for the most part. They're probably doing it to others also. But we're not involved in the war other than the fact that we are involved in a negotiation because people want us there. Ukraine wants us involved very much. Europe wants us involved.